Happy Sabbath, everyone, and thank you so much for coming out to be with us as we go into our AY, which will continue our evangelistic series, Fixing Families Through Faith, with special emphasis now on health, life, more abundance. So at this point in time, I'm going to ask all of us to just bow our head and close our eyes as we go into starting our service. Dear Lord, I thank you for this wonderful Sabbath day. And I thank you for this opportunity that we have to gather together, even though we are apart, to be able to worship you. I ask that as we go through this evening's program, that you will allow those who would like to log on to quickly do so, help that we don't have any technical difficulties, and most importantly, dear Lord, help that each of us will be able to learn something today that we can apply to our lives and that we can share with others so that we can truly help your children. Please be with our presenters this evening. Please be with anybody who is on the line today, who is going through any issues, dear Lord. Please heal our hearts and heal our minds. In your son's name we pray. Amen. And so as we go into our preliminaries, we'll be starting with our AY mission. And the AY mission is the salvation of youth through Jesus Christ. We understand youth ministry to be that work of the church that is conducted for, with, and by young people. Our aim is the Advent message to all the world in my generation. And our motto, the love of Christ compels me. At this point in time, I will place our So as we go into our program, I just want us to go through our devotional thoughts. And the text comes to us from 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 4. And it says, I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Mona is emotionally flat. Not excited, not suicidal, just blah and gloomy. The exact reason for her down cycle isn't clear. Is it because she gained 5 pounds? Did it start when she failed to receive even one card on Valentine's Day? She's not sure. After school today, at the suggestion of a friend, Mona went to the mall and purchased a new pair of jeans. She thought, maybe these will make me feel better. Guess what? The jeans didn't do the trick. The Bible has a better prescription for beating the blues. Consider the case of Elijah the prophet. After a time of spiritual victory, he slipped into despair. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. Then he lay down under the tree and fell asleep. That's when God went to work. He first brought him rest and refreshment. He then reassigned Elijah to service and reminded him of the other faithful servants of God. Are you experiencing feelings of hopelessness, lack of motivation, low energy, difficulty communicating, a desire to sleep excessively or trouble sleeping, low self-esteem, behavior problems? Do you have trouble concentrating? If so, you may be suffering from a case of the blues or depression. If you have these symptoms to an extreme degree, you may need to see a trained professional, your family doctor, your guidance counselor, your pastor, a psychiatrist, or psychologist. Real recovery can begin with a simple phone call. But what do you do to get out of the pits? First, ask for help. Ask God to do in your life what he did in Elijah's, and seek help from trained professionals as needed. Two, tell a friend. Others cannot read your mind, and they are not aware necessarily of your feelings unless you tell them. Three, laugh. Spend time with a funny friend who makes you giggle. 4, help someone else. Directing your focus outside yourself does wonders for the inside of you. 5, move around. You'd be amazed at how a physical fitness routine can sometimes help your mood. And 6, be thankful. It's hard to be down when you're counting the blessings that God has given you. I invite you to read Elijah's story further in 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 to 9. Dear Lord, once again, as we come before you, we thank you that you are a Father that is always with us. As we go into our talk today, dear Lord, specifically spending time on mental health, dear Lord, I ask that we will learn the tools that we need to have to be able to get help when we need it and to be able to succeed. Dear Lord, please help that as we go through this talk, that we'll be able to unpack all the different traumas and most importantly, remove the stigma that sometimes exists within our circle on mental health. Help us to be able to be compassionate to those who are going through mental health struggles and to be compassionate for ourselves, dear Lord. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Or Heritage Bite, brought to you by the Ephesus AY Department. AY, AYS, Youth Society, Sunshine Bands, Missionary Volunteers, MV. There have been many names for the youth ministries in the Adventist Church. But did you ever wonder how AYS as we know it really started? I know we only see them as old now, but the fact is, our founders were mostly youth. James White was 22 when he started preaching the Advent message. Ellen G. White was 16 when she had her first vision from God. John Nevins Andrews, of whom Andrews University is named for, was 16 when he started to observe the Sabbath, and 24 when he became an ordained minister. Uriah Smith was 23 when he became the editor of the Advent Review and Sabbath Herald. For the first 40 years, it was simply taken for granted that youth were members of the church. However, time passed, and a gap emerged between the young and old. In 1879, in Hazleton, Michigan, Harry Fenner and Luther Warren, aged 17 and 14, developed the idea for a boys' society. They prayed about their plans, and from this was born the first Seventh-day Adventist Young People's Society on record. Early emphasis was on missionary work and the improvement of personal conduct, especially healthful living. Soon, girls were invited to join, and before you knew it, other societies of young people sprang up in Nebraska, Iowa, Ohio, and Australia. In 1901, the Sabbath School Department was asked to care for youth work at the General Conference level, and at the GC session in Gland, Switzerland, the Seventh-day Adventist Young People's Society of Missionary Volunteers was formed, led by M.E. Kearns and Matilda Erickson. This was eventually renamed the Youth Department of Missionary Volunteers, then Adventist Youth Department, and finally in 2005, the Youth Ministries Department, encompassing the Adventurer Club, Pathfinder Club, and Senior Youth Society. AYS remains an active part in our churches. The official meeting time varies from church to church. Some follow the traditional AYS model, while others have a more contemporary or informal program in different settings and with new names to make it more appealing to the youth of the church and community. In the end, regardless of the name or the time of meeting, the aim of AYS remains the same: to lead youth to discover their individual worth and develop their spiritual gifts and abilities, while equipping and empowering them for a life of service within God's church and community. And that's our Heritage Bite.
This evening, we're blessed to have with us Dr. Stacey Nicely and the dynamic duo, Mr. and Mrs. Russell and Margie Bates. Dr. Nicely is a counseling psychologist at the Andrews University, and Margie and Russell are social workers and counselors working with elderly and children, respectively. I have had the pleasure of working them on mental health programs before, most recently in 2019. And even though I was one of the participants in the program, I learned a lot from them. And so it's my hope that as we go through this evening, that they'll be able to give us information that we can use as strong tools to help to ensure our own mental health and those around us. And so after our special music in song, the, the mic will be turned over to Dr. Stacey Nicely and Mr. and Mrs. Russell and Margie Bates.
Give me my hands to reach out to
Hello, everyone. Are you hearing me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we are.
Great, thank you. Um, it's an honor to join you this afternoon. Myself, Margie, and Russell. Thank you, Avril, for the invitation, and thank you to your pastor, your senior pastor, Pastor Lawrence Brown, and your associate pastor, Pastor Corey Marshall. We're delighted to join you, and we're going to be talking about mental health this afternoon. So thank you for having us. We bring you greetings all the way from Michigan. And I noticed, Avril, you had Michigan quite a bit in your AY Heritage Bite. So I like that. So greetings
Yeah.
from, yeah, so we bring you greetings from Michigan. I work at Andrews University. I'm one of the psychologists at the Counseling Center, and I also teach in the graduate psychology department. And Margie and Russell will introduce themselves later. I met them both at Andrews University. So we're happy to be with you. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and we're gonna get started. Oh wait, let me just make sure that I have done that. Sound share, yep, we're all good. Okay, so we're going to go through the presentation and we will be happy to answer your questions at the end. So as we're presenting, please be sure to jot your questions down so that you will have the chance to ask those at the appropriate time. So mental health awareness. There have been quite a bit of talk in the media recently regarding mental health, especially surrounding the Tokyo Olympics and the well-known Simone Biles deciding that she wasn't going to be participating in the rest of the games because she was experiencing some mental health concerns. And there's just been quite a bit of talk recently, and there are some people who are not understanding, but you look okay. What do you mean you're having mental health concerns? You seem physically well to me. And some people are thinking, well, she got the jitters and just decided to check out. The reality is, unlike you having a sprained ankle or a broken arm, mental health concerns aren't necessarily visible, but it's important to keep in mind that because you can't see it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, right? And so we're going to go through mental health awareness issues this afternoon, and feel free to ask your questions, and I'm hoping that you will learn something that can help you to improve your own mental health. So I'm going to be touching on taking care of our mental health, and Margie and Russell will talk about dealing with loneliness, particularly as it pertains to the older population, the older ones of us. All right, so what is mental health? When we talk about mental health, what exactly are we talking about? When we talk about physical health, we think, okay, well, we don't have the flu, or okay, we go to the doctor for our annual physical to check to make sure that everything is okay. We think about maybe diabetes, some of those physical conditions that you often know about. But when we talk about mental health, sometimes many people don't know what to do with that. They don't know how to place it or what to make of it. So let's go through what is mental health really. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. So it's a condition that affects how we think, how we feel, and how we behave. It helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. So it's those internal processes that determine how we think, feel, and behave, right? And how we think, feel, and behave have implications for our relationships. They have implications for our ability to manage our daily life's tasks, right? And mental health is important at every stage of life, whether you're a child or an adolescent or an adult. At every stage of life, it's important that we're taking care of our mental health in the same way, or even to a greater degree than we attend to our physical health, but at least strike a balance. So when we experience mental health problems, that means that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are affected. Something is off. What are the factors that contribute to mental health problems, you might ask? Well, there are biological factors, such as things that we might be genetically predisposed to. For example, if you have a mom who was diagnosed with schizophrenia, there's at least a 17 to say 25% chance that her offspring is vulnerable to also having schizophrenia. So it could be genetic or your own brain chemistry, and brain chemistry can be altered over time as a result of a number of factors, stress being one of them. And it could be stress from early childhood stress, or it could be stress during your adult years. That just changes brain chemistry and can lead to mental health problems. So life experiences, as I mentioned before, such as trauma or abuse. Research has been done in the not so distant past on adverse childhood experience, and it shows that kids who've experienced ongoing stress throughout life, and that could be as early as in utero, it has implications for how we make sense of our world and whether or not we develop mental health conditions. And there's also family history of mental health problems, as we mentioned before. So these three factors have implications for mental health. What are some early warning signs? How can you tell? So if you're sneezing, you have a runny nose, you have cough, chances are you're going to be getting suspicious or wondering, do I have the flu or is it COVID? So you see some symptoms that tell you that something is off. If you're beginning to wheeze a little or a lot, having difficulty breathing, and you're asthmatic, you're thinking, okay, well, maybe I'm having an asthma attack. Or if you're having, pain in your joints, you have difficulty moving, and it is persistent over a long period of time, you're thinking, oh, I wonder if it's arthritis. So we have a fair sense of how to pick up if we're experiencing physical problems, but mental health problems, we sometimes aren't so keen on some of the warning signs. So let's go through some of those. If you find yourself eating or sleeping too much or too little, so your sleeping and eating patterns have changed. You find yourself withdrawing from people, your usual social groups or your usual activities, something might be off. If you find yourself having low or no energy to do your daily lifestyles, you're feeling numb or like nothing matters, kind of just feeling blah, going through life with that blah feeling, meh, as we often say, or having unexplained aches and pains, feeling helpless or hopeless, feeling unusually confused, forgetful, on edge, angry, upset, worried, or scared. So your mood is off. You're a lot more irritable than before. You're yelling or fighting with family and friends, just frequent interpersonal conflicts, experiencing severe mood swings that cause problems in relationships, having persistent thoughts and memories you can't get out of your head, smoking, drinking, or using drugs to deal with your feelings, hearing voices or believing things that are not true, that don't exist maybe, or thinking of harming yourself or others. So having suicidal ideation or intent with a plan, or just overall general inability to perform daily tasks, such as getting to work, getting out of bed, getting to school, or just being able to take care of your family and your daily responsibilities. Now, these early warning signs that I mentioned could be applicable to a number of different mental health concerns. But of course, much of this tends to be reflective of depression, but not limited to. So it's important to take note of some of those warning signs. And if you find that you have been experiencing some of these, especially for a period of 2 weeks or more, then you might be dealing with clinical depression, and it's time to do more than just praying about it if that's all you've been doing. It probably is time for you to go seek professional help, because you might be in need of just a safe space to talk through your various concerns. And with COVID being an issue that has been so prolonged, many people have been having mental health concerns, and they are either not aware of it or denying it or hoping it will just go away by itself. And neither of those options are helpful. So what are some benefits of maintaining good mental health? Why do we need to take care of our mental health? We feel like, well, we're still moving about. No one can see that we're not feeling at our best. So, do I even need to pay attention? Well, let's look at some benefits of maintaining good mental health. Improves ability to cope with the stresses of life. So when your mental health is in shape, you can take on life's challenges to a greater degree. You have improved work productivity. Your concentration is probably sharper, and you are likely to be more productive on the job. You're able to maintain healthy relationships. So you're not getting in frequent fights with your peers or with your siblings or with your other family members. Relationships tend to be healthy. You understand how to set healthy boundaries and how to resolve conflicts in a manner that's healthy, and you're able to communicate your needs without being irritable or other behaviors that are just not conducive to healthy interactions. You're able to make meaningful contributions to your community. So you're motivated to show up at church. You have the energy to maybe help out at the community center in your area. You're able to contribute to, the lives of your kids in meaningful ways, or the lives of your loved ones in meaningful ways. And ultimately, you have the energy, you have the mental sharpness to realize your full potential, because you have the energy and the mental awareness to be fully engaged. So if we have persistent warning signs and we're not attending to them, we can develop mental illness, right? And that's the condition that affects, as I said, our thinking, feeling, or behavior. And such conditions may affect someone's ability to maintain relationships, as I mentioned earlier, and just functioning in everyday life. Now, what are some common mental health conditions? We have the mood disorders, such as depression or seasonal affective disorder. So if you find that you experience much of these symptoms more so during the winter months, then you might be dealing with seasonal affective disorder, what we call SAD, or postpartum depression that's after giving birth. There's also anxiety disorders. We have generalized or social anxiety or other forms. I'm just giving some examples here. We might have the more chronic disorders, such as your psychotic disorders, for example, schizophrenia, or personality disorders that tend to be more enduring or pervasive, for example, borderline or narcissistic personality. We have substance abuse disorders, and these are just some samples, some common examples of mental health conditions, by no means limited. I have a brief clip now I'm going to show you on depression. So as you're viewing again, just take a note of if you've been experiencing any of these symptoms, 5 or more, for a period of 2 weeks. It might mean that you are dealing with
Hey there. Welcome to
major
Life Noggin.
depressive
Depression
disorder.
is a serious illness that affects over 300 million people worldwide. While everyone feels sad sometimes, people with major depressive disorder or clinical depression can be down for weeks, months, and even years. It's not something they can shake by changing their routine. For many, the activities that used to make them happy don't anymore. They may feel hopeless and exhausted, have trouble sleeping, lose their appetite, or have a decreased libido. It can be hard for them to get through the day or complete routine tasks. At its worst, depression can lead to suicide. I know that this is a delicate topic, so I teamed up with my YouTube friend and licensed therapist, Katie Morton. Katie, could you give us some insight onto why people get depressed?
Sure thing. There isn't really one particular reason people slip into depression. It can be triggered by an event or stress, but it can also start without a clear cause. Either way, it's real and serious. 1 in 10 people have been depressed at least once in their lifetime, and it's a leading cause of disability worldwide.
For decades, scientists believe that the illness was caused by an imbalance of certain chemicals in the brain, like serotonin, that help regulate mood. Many medications that treat depression boost these chemicals, but they often take weeks to work. This may be because the chemicals are actually helping build new neurons and connections in the brain.
Several studies support this theory, suggesting that the root cause of depression could be problems with the brain's circuits. One study showed that depressed people have weak connections in the parts of the brain associated with reward and memory, and strong connections in the areas associated with punishment. Another study found hyperactivity in the areas controlling concentration and mood. This might be what causes negative thoughts to stay at the front of someone's mind, even when they try to push them away. Scientists are now looking for treatments that target these circuits directly to provide better relief.
But depression can be more than just bad feelings. It's also been linked to chronic pain, immune system problems, heart disease, and hormone imbalances. In fact, physical symptoms are often the first sign of major depressive disorder. In a study of roughly 1,200 people who met the criteria for depression, nearly 70% went to the doctor for physical symptoms, not mental. So does depression cause physical problems, or is it the other way around?
Well, it may be both. For example, researchers have long thought that stress can cause stomach issues, but there's also evidence that irritation in your gut can trigger mood swings. Since the mind and body are so closely linked, mental illness is often felt physically, even though there's no illness in the body itself. Those physical sensations are called psychosomatic symptoms. Some scientists believe that physical and emotional pain share similar pathways in the brain, and it's necessary to treat both types of symptoms to get relief.
No matter how depression manifests, the most important thing is to get the right help. Many people suffer silently because they think admitting to depression is a sign of weakness. But it's not, and you're not alone. Talking about it with a professional is one of the main things that can help, and most forms of depression are treatable.
If you know someone who might need help, or if you need help now, you can check the links in the description for free resources. And please, speak to a professional. Depression can be very difficult to live with, but there are lots of ways to get help.
Okay, so that was just a brief clip on depression, and I'm hoping that as you watched, you found it helpful. Let me just make my way back to my slides. Okay, so by way of quick summary.
Thank you so much to Katie for helping with this video. She is
Try to get rid of this. Get back to my slides. All right. Just making my way back to my slides. Okay. All right, so by way of summary, these are the symptoms that the video just covered. I just have them up on the screen. So again, you could take a look to see whether or not there's anything there that you need to be paying attention to, or at least, if not now, keep that in mind as you move forward. So what does depression look like in children? It does look a little different, and sometimes people misinterpret kids' manifestation of depression as them being oppositional or defiant or rude. But because kids do not necessarily have the vocabulary to communicate with you what is it that's going on with them, it oftentimes, their feelings oftentimes are manifested in behavioral problems, such as defiance of authority. You might also see in them intense fear, excessive worry or anxiety, for example, refusing to go to bed or not wanting to go to school. You might also see frequent outbursts of anger or persistent disobedience or aggression, hyperactivity, changes in school performance, poor grades despite strong efforts, or frequent temper tantrums. So if you notice any of these behaviors in a child that you was never manifesting these behaviors in the past, it might not necessarily be that they're being rude or they're being defiant. It could be that they're having some mental health concerns and that they need your help and attention. So what are some ways to care for our mental health? So we've looked at the warning signs, we've looked at why it is important, or what are some benefits to maintaining our mental health. And we are now going to take a look at some specific coping strategies. And I'll just run through these real quickly. Accepting your feelings, recognize what you're feeling. It can also help to treat them like clouds, meaning, and that's one strategy I'll teach to my clients. So let's say, for example, you're having a busy day at school or at work, but you're constantly being distracted by thoughts of something that's not going well in your life. You probably lost a loved one due to COVID, maybe, so you're grieving, or just something else that's bothering you. It's important to recognize what you're feeling, but you're also you're not wanting to be constantly overwhelmed with what you're feeling. So you can acknowledge them as you go throughout your day, and the thought comes to mind. You can acknowledge it, recognize, okay, I see you. I recognize that I'm feeling sad right now. But in the same way that you see the clouds roll on by through the sky, you can also figuratively let those thoughts, treat them as clouds, and just let them roll on by, and schedule a time when it's convenient for you to revisit those thoughts. And that's one helpful mindfulness strategy. You can also use logic. Apply reasoning to your circumstances and don't just rely on how you feel. So look at the facts. So if you're feeling worthless or helpless or useless, do you have any facts? If you didn't get the grade that you were hoping, let's say in an exam you did at school and you feel like a failure, I mean, have you always failed at everything? And because you failed one or two exams, or because you didn't do well on this particular task on the job, does this mean that you are a failure? Or you just failed at one task? Know your vulnerabilities. Be alert to when you are likely to be most vulnerable, and put plans in place. So if you lost a loved one and it's coming up to the anniversary of their passing, plan for it. You know, not just allow it to sneak upon you, but make plans with friends or family members in terms of how you will treat the day. Stay hopeful. As Proverbs 13 verse 2 says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. So find something to be hopeful for each day. And in my work with my clients, that's usually one of the first things we target, is affirming, finding something that they can be hopeful for, or even affirming their efforts at coming to therapy because it says, I have hope that I can get better. Avoid people's highlight reel, and particularly as it pertains to the social media age, we sometimes tend to get distracted by all the great things that appear to be happening in other people's lives, and then we compare ourselves to others. And social media depression is real. They have been doing research on depression as a result that's triggered by social media engagement, and it's a thing. So you're wanting to be careful of avoiding other people's highlight reel. Look for the positives. So accept the reality and practice reframing. Look for the positives in the midst of difficult circumstances. And I'm not referring to toxic positivity where you pretend that you're not having problems, or you pretend that you're not feeling sad right now. It's okay to acknowledge those difficult emotions, but rather than dwelling on just that, take a look at other ways that you can reframe your difficult situation. Spend time in nature, get fresh air, and engage in physical activity. That helps to release those positive endorphins that help to improve mood. Maintain a healthy diet. Research does show that there is a positive correlation between healthy eating and mood. So the more healthy your diet, the likely you are to experience improved mood. Link your learning. So recall the healthy strategies that you've used in the past to deal with previous difficult circumstances and see how you overcame and see how you can apply it to your current circumstances. Find time to play, it's important. Develop a hobby, spend time in nature, learn how to relax and unwind. And social support is key. Your church family, your friends, your co-workers, build a strong supportive network that can help listen to you or just be supportive during times of need. And I mentioned managing social media consumption, but also manage your news consumption. Sometimes the news can just put you in a negative space. And so sometimes it's helpful to just kind of pace yourself with how much news you consume. Scaffold children and youth. So in addition to protecting your child, your children, teach them how to deal with difficult, challenging life experiences. In many instances, young people struggle with mental health concerns because we've been pretty good at protecting kids, but not giving them the opportunity to fail at something so they can build those emotional muscles. Teach them how to accept what they cannot change. Teach them how to tolerate distress and teach them how to look for the positives, acronym ATL. Spend time in prayer and meditation. Again, research does show that prayer and meditation can help to improve well-being, but I also want to interject that it doesn't necessarily mean that because we're Christians and because we're praying that we won't have mental health concerns. And it doesn't mean that because we have mental health concerns, we're not good Christians. Those are myths. Seek professional help. Definitely, if your symptoms persist and you're leaning on your social support system and you're doing all the other strategies I mentioned before and the symptoms remain, it's time to go see a mental health professional who will help you walk through your problems. And if there's a need for you to be prescribed medication, that's okay too. And take care of your physical health. When you know that you're living in a healthy body, it can help to reduce excess worry and anxiety about what might be going on. So get those annual physical exams. And finally, reduce stress. Stress impairs memory, concentration, contributes to sleep problems and irritability and all other kinds of chronic mental health concerns. So be intentional about finding ways to reduce stress. I'm going to turn over now to Margie and Russell, and then we can come back and look at these Bible verses at the end. Margie and Russell, over to you.
Thank you, Stacy. And Russell and I are also glad to have been asked to join you in this afternoon's talk and are happy to be able to share some of our perspectives on the areas of mental health with the populations that we deal with. I'm a social worker. I deal with the vulnerable adults age 55 and above, and Russell will introduce himself and go first.
Yes, my name is Russell Bates, and I am a therapist, and mostly I deal with the younger generation. And one of the, as we've been talking, one of the items that I'd like to touch on is suicide. And from the statistics that Stacy just provided us with in that short clip, there are at least 4 or 5 of us in this very meeting that have considered suicide in the past several weeks. You know, Adventists do get depressed, and I have known several Adventists and Christians who have taken their lives. Now, this suicide is very, very serious, and it's very often, we rarely talk about it. Very rarely do we talk about people who are taking their lives. And that's one of the areas that I wanted to talk about first, is don't be afraid to ask someone, are you thinking of committing suicide? Are you thinking of taking your life? Are you thinking of hurting yourself? And also, those 4 of us who have considered it, I want you to be very brave and tell someone, listen, I am feeling so sad. I'm feeling so depressed. I am feeling so bad that I may not want to take my life, but I just don't want to be here anymore. You know, this is a very serious thing that we really need to address, especially not only as Christians, but as African Americans. We Black people rarely seek counseling. You know, we rarely want to say how we're feeling. When we go to church, when we used to go to church, quickly we would say happy Sabbath and continue on as though nothing has happened. But it's really important that we consider this, because as Stacy and Margie are talking about mental health, the inroad of not caring for our mental health can be often very disastrous, not only for us, but for others. And I often tell young people when I am counseling, that your actions do not only concern yourself. They don't only affect you. What we do affects everyone around us. So back to young people in traumatic events. Don't be afraid to talk about the traumatic event. Whatever has happened, don't be afraid to discuss it. You know, young people do not benefit from not thinking about it or putting it out of their minds. If a child senses that his or her caretaker is upset about the event, they will not bring it up. In the long run, this only makes the young person's their recovery more difficult. And another important thing that we can do as far as our mental health is provide a consistent, predictable pattern for the day. You know, as we have been locked in the house for all this time, we've kind of fallen far away from every day having a set pattern or having things that we do each day, our devotion or exercise. You know, try to come up with a schedule that you will use every day. And also, one big thing that I have really found that has helped me is having something to look forward to at the end of each week. You know, usually Margie and I will go watch the sunset or go for a walk in our special park. You know, there's something that we have to look forward to each week. So I would encourage you to do that. Add something into your life that you look forward to every week. And before I go back to Margie, again, I want to really press forward the fact that you should not be afraid to ask someone if they are contemplating taking their life or committing suicide. It will not push them further into this darkness if you question. I'm going to turn it over to Margie.
Okay. I had mentioned earlier that I work with a program that deals with vulnerable adults 55 and above. And just to speak for Russell for a moment, he also currently works at the Community Riverwood, which is a community mental health center in Benton Harbor, Michigan. So beside being a social worker, Russell is also a retired Army Sergeant Major. He was in the Army for 23 years. We got married and I was with him for the last 17 of those years. During that time, I set up 14 homes. I started out with him at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. Then we were transferred to Korea and then Germany. So we were 11 years overseas, then returned back to Florida and to Georgia. And every time we moved in all those 14 homes that we lived in, he was the only person I knew when we moved there. So I am acquainted with loneliness. Also, while I was in Korea, this is in the early 90s, I had my son. Back then, there wasn't the easy communication we have now. There was no email, there wasn't, phones with international programs where we could text each other. It was very infrequent communication. And when I would make a phone call, you get carried away, you'd get a bill for like $300. So didn't have that communication from home, didn't have my close family support around me. And with my post-birth hormones, I had postpartum depression. So Russell will tell you it lasted 2 years. I don't think I was quite that bad, but that's what Russell will testify to. But I do agree I was depressed. And then when we moved to Germany, my son was 6 months old. And then my sister, who was my oldest friend and my closest confidant, she started battling an unusual cancer. So during the 4 years that she was battling that, I was back and forth as often as I could. And I last saw her 6 weeks before she died. But with losing her, I definitely also know depression. So let me start with loneliness. So as we all know, this pandemic has just emphasized everything that was in place before, and for many people created new stressors. And often people are reluctant to admit to them. But social media now enables everyone to share every aspect of their life that they care to. And so I even saw one situation, there was an enterprising young Black lady who has become a millionaire simply by sharing videos of herself eating and describing her food, the textures, the flavors, the enjoyment. And one of her subscribers explained that she lives alone, and for her to sit and eat her own supper while she is watching this young lady enjoy her supper makes her feel less lonely. And this lady has enough subscribers, she's now getting paid to do this. There are many causes of loneliness, which Stacy covered in her talk. They're social, mental, emotional, environmental. And it's not unusual to experience loneliness. We have all experienced that. But when the harmfulness comes in, when it becomes long-term, when we don't address it, when we don't find ways to adjust to it. Some of the symptoms of loneliness, they say loneliness can trigger the release of stress hormones, which can raise your blood pressure. Your memory is not as sharp. It decreases your resistance to infection, and it increases cardiovascular disease and cancer. And maybe you're not sleeping as well, you're feeling tired, you're anxious, you're eating a lot of junk food. That's just some of the ways loneliness can show up in your life. So I believe that we all are acquainted with loneliness. We all agree it's there. It's a part of our lives in various levels. Well, let's talk about some of the ways to combat this. So one way to easily start working on loneliness is to volunteer. There are many ways to volunteer. If you look around your neighborhood, I know here in Berrien Springs, we have a community health center that takes donations. They have a shop that they sell them in. They are always looking for volunteers. You can be in the back sorting through the donations. You can be out on the floor stocking. That's one place to volunteer. I have a friend that volunteers at the local high school. After school, she spends an hour mentoring in various subjects, and she has found fulfillment in doing that. You can also volunteer at a soup kitchen. You can serve. You don't have to be the cook, be online. You can set up, you can greet, but there are people to help that way. You can babysit, or you can pet sit. Many people have adopted pets during this pandemic. Of course, you do have to realize now the pandemic is slowing down, you still have that pet. So it is a commitment, but many people have found joy and smiling, just interacting with their pets. Another way you can combat loneliness is to join a class. You can join an art class. You can join an exercise class now that restrictions are being released some, or you can go walking by yourself or a walking class. You can learn a new activity. During this pandemic, Russell has taken up archery. If you come to our house, you'll see 4 different targets placed around the yard. Anyone who enters our yard who expresses the slightest interest, Russell will have them out there trying out how to, teaching them how to shoot an arrow. And he has really enjoyed this new hobby of archery and is a member of an archery club. You can also reach out to former friends. A few months ago, I reconnected with my roommate from college, and I have found a joy in catching up with her, hearing about her life, her grandkids. And you can also talk to strangers. I read an article where this gentleman was saying pre-pandemic, he would be rushing to work, walking down the sidewalk, looking at his phone, not making eye contact, just going by people. But now that he's able to get out and about a little bit, he is discovering just to make eye contact, say hello, how are you, how's your day, to perfect strangers, people he would just walk by before. It is giving him a lift just to be able to have that connection. And also, if you ever see a mother with a young child or a baby, all you have to do is say, oh, what a cutie. And then you've got a conversation going, you've got smiles, and everyone walks away smiling. It's a great encounter. Also, Russell already mentioned doing a weekly activity, going for the walk, doing the sunset, but also let me caution you, don't get upset with yourself when the week slips by and you have not done it yet. You know, it takes a while to set up a routine. And so when you fall off, don't beat yourself up, just simply get back to it again. So the idea of the combating loneliness, do some self-care, turn your focus outside of yourself, and your spirits are generally lifted. Now, Stacy also already covered depression, but I wanted to just add a little bit to that. I had noticed that, I had noticed that there are researchers studying depression on, they're looking at depression on every aspect of life or people group that you can imagine. I found articles on depression in older adults, which you expect, loneliness and depression in patients with cancer during COVID, traditional media use and depression, intimate relationships and depression, food insecurity and depression among low-income adults in the US, depression, anxiety, and poor sleep among Chinese and Korean immigrants in the USA, anxiety and depression among people living with HIV in Florida, child and adolescent predictors of major depression in the transition to adulthood, by ancestral depression, and even causal effect of tooth loss on depression in the USA. So as you can see, there are many, many varied factors that can cause depression in our lives. To add to some of the interventions that are already suggested, since depression has been clearly established already, some of the interventions that I have come up with are, one thing that really helps me are music. Music is a mood lifter. My favorite mood lifter is Chantel Norman Beatty sings a version of Jesus Will Fix It. That really lifts my spirits every time I hear it. And then, of course, the professionals that are there to help, both medical and psychological, medical and mental. You have your doctors, you have your psychologists, your psychiatrists. All of them are trained to be able to help you. Also, as Christians, we have a powerful resource. Proverbs 17:22 says in part, "A merry heart does good like a medicine." So God desires us as his children to be happy, but Satan's goal is to destroy our happiness in any way he can. Today's Sabbath school lesson was discussing how strong a connection to Christ will bring you rest, bring you peace, bring you feelings of safety. Also memorizing Bible verses, a favorite verse that you can say. My favorite verse currently is Psalm 62, 5-8, which starts, "Find rest, O my soul, in God alone. My hope comes from him." So the bottom line is, for me, in our lives, we will experience loneliness, depression, and may even be diagnosed with major depression. However, God has provided avenues to relief. We have our self-actions we can perform. We have our trained professionals to support us. And we have God, if we allow him to be a constant in our lives. There is no need to remain in this state. And that's the end of my portion.
Yeah, I saw several questions on the screen. One of them hit pretty close to home. It says, what do you tell someone who is lonely? What do you say to someone who's lonely and there's a lot of people all around them? Now, I've often had this experience where even in other countries where I'm the only person that speaks English in a huge group. But I think oftentimes when we are around people, we don't really interact. We don't push outside ourselves and may ask someone, what's your favorite color? Or, how many siblings do you have? Or, what do you have a pet? What was your favorite pet growing up? Get to really, when you're around people, take the time to really push yourself to speak to them and talk to them. And that will also help with the loneliness. Yes, my wife's tapping me for something.
No, I wasn't sure if someone was going to read the questions at the end.
I wanted to add to what Russell said real quickly regarding loneliness. And I think he gave a great suggestion in terms of just challenging yourself to come outside of your comfort zone and talk to people. In addition to that, I would also want to say that sometimes, in many instances, loneliness is a symptom of clinical depression. And so, if you find that you're doing the different things to try to get yourself out of that funk and to not be lonely in a crowd and it's not working, you might want to pay attention to whether you're experiencing other symptoms that we just mentioned earlier. And then you might need to be seeking professional help, because sometimes you need that to be able to get past that being lonely in a crowd situation.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Russell.
I just interact. I suffer from depression and I see a therapist and I take medication. There's no shame in that. And I resisted it in the beginning. My wife was saying to me, you really need to see someone, and which I did.
And it does make a difference.
All right, we did have another question. I think it talked about helping kids.
Is there another one? Russell just got a call from the hospital. He'll be away for like 2 minutes.
Okay. I saw a question, how do you help little children who are depressed? They can't really express how they are feeling. I could add some things, and then Margie, if you had anything to that. I did, after I saw the question, I quickly brought up a feelings wheel, which I'll just share on my screen briefly. So it's important to recognize that, well, as Avril said, and I touched in the presentation, kids don't necessarily have the vocabulary to explain what it is that they're feeling, but they're visual. So if you use like a feelings wheel, like what I have up on my screen here, I just copied that real quickly. So I've actually gone to some homes and seen something like this on like a refrigerator or as a prominent spot where kids and parents commune. They are a common place in the house. And you can show this to your kids and they are able to pick out what is it that they are feeling. And so using a feelings wheel as a daily activity in your home, you can put it up on your fridge, and sometimes they come with like a little square magnet, so the child could just shift that around on a daily basis to help you understand what they're feeling. Kids also express themselves through play. So interact with them through their play and have them, you can encourage them to show you or to demonstrate to you what is it that's going on in their thoughts. What are they thinking about? You can have a sand tray at home and have them express themselves through play, have them construct certain imagery of what's going on in their minds, and they can, by working out their feelings through play, whether work it out or communicate to you what it is that they are feeling. It also helps to teach them how to self-regulate. Teach them how to do that deep breathing in their child appropriate way. If it means in through the nose, out through the mouth, or the Husa breathing pattern, but teach them how to self-regulate by taking deep breaths. And taking deep breaths does work. It helps to calm that sympathetic nervous system down, that flight or flight stress response system. And by teaching them how to deep breathe, they are engaging, you are teaching them how to engage the parasympathetic nervous system, which is a cool system of the body that helps to self-regulate and helps to bring the body back to a state of calm when they're stressed. So help them work their feelings out through play, or get a feelings chart at home so they can point to whatever it is that they're feeling. Teach them how to self-regulate using deep breathing, and also talk with them. Get down to their level, and it's okay to ask them, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? What's going on? And they will be able to tell you. But you have to be available so that your kid know that you are genuinely interested in what's going on with them. So find the time to interact with them. Make time so that they know that you're available. Marcia, did you want to add anything else to that question, to answer that question?
No, when Russell returns, he'll be able to address that a little further. He even taught a class on interventions with children from 0 to 6 and 6 to 12. But I did see a flash of a question, something about taking care of parents. Can you read that question? There's something for you when you come back.
Oh, just when you finish. I got it.
Trying to find that one, Margie. Oh, is it? Once a lot of people get depressed when they have to take care of their parents. They are not used to having their parents depend on them. It is usually the other way around. So what's the question?
Well, I can actually comment on that. They're really.
That one was just sent to me as a statement, but I guess you could go through it because some people are sending me questions.
It is a very accurate statement. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you, Margie.
It is a very accurate statement. In fact, for personal experience, my mother is now 91 and a half, and her cognition is rapidly declining. So 2 years ago, we relocated her from Michigan to Phoenix, Arizona, where my sister lives. So they live near each other, but she is in a facility that has 3 stages: independent, assisted, and memory care. So, and I know typically the situation is the parent is in their own home and you are doing everything you can to keep them in that home, or they are living with their child. and you are having, like the person said, you're used to that parent being independent, taking their medicines, grocery shopping, doing their personal care. And now you're having to intervene. I remember when we had to take the checkbook from my mother when she was writing multiple checks and could not remember. She had already written this. And the reasoning and her saying, oh, okay. But then the next week, where's my checkbook? I can't find my checkbook. And you having to go through it again. But to see her as her ability to handle everyday tasks decline. Now we have her medication in a wheel because she can't remember to take it. This wheel flashes and the light goes off when it's time. You know, my sister does. We've taken all the finances, the ability to buy anything. We've had to handle that. All the food shopping, everything we are now having to take over. She is managing her personal care, but it is very stressful. And even when you read about it, even when you know that as you age, just the way you yourself can't run to the corner the way you used to when you were 20. As you age, your body changes, your mind changes, but it is a challenge to deal with it.
Okay, thanks, Margie. I see another question.
Ezia said something about,
I see, are children whose mothers were using drugs when they were pregnant more likely to have mental illness? There is a likelihood, yes, there's a strong possibility. We have a plethora of research on how children are affected from mother's substance use. It does lead to permanent neurological damage, yes. What are some of the symptoms to look for in small children? They might be developmentally delayed, just not meeting some of those developmental milestones, or it could be that they have cognitive impairment. They have difficulty learning. Sometimes they have physical defects as well, depending on the severity of the substance use at the time when mom was pregnant.
can I
Yes,
add,
Margie.
emotional growth
Mhm.
can be stunted. And so
Mhm.
they aren't developing the attachments to others that are normally formed. Plus they have issues expressing themselves. So you may see more anger, more destructive behaviors because they cannot express themselves.
And just difficult to soothe.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Another question. A lot of people get depressed when, oh, I did ask that one.
Oh, and let me just
Yes,
add to
Marcia.
the one about taking care of your parent. You do need to watch out for yourself. You can end up worn out, depressed, you know, where you cannot manage your own life, and your parent, meanwhile, is going on, you know, their merry way, quote unquote. So you do have to really be aware of self-care, of still taking time for yourself. You can reach out to support groups. There are, you know, as the population ages, there are more and more children taking care of their parents because parents are living longer. And so there are many support groups. Some are online. I went to a support group that met at a local library, and just to hear other people expressing, sharing their experiences, you get some tips, and you also have a safe place to vent, because there is simply no doubt that this is a challenging new part of your life.
Next, thanks, Margie. Next question. The pandemic has taken quite a toll on me, not interacting with folks in the way I'm used to doing. So it has been tough on me. I'm pressing on, but the emotional limp is there, even if you don't see it. Yes, it's true. The pandemic has taken a toll on I would say all of us, I hope I'm not wrong with that, but in some way or the other, we've been impacted, and it does take a toll. And so it's important to, first of all, recognize that. Don't be too hard on yourself. It's okay to remind yourself that these are unprecedented times, and we have not we've not had any reason to work on developing the kinds of coping skills that are required to successfully navigate these times, because we've never lived through these times. So it's all new for all of us, and we're all figuring it out. So it's really crucial that you just be gentle with yourself and others. And Margie gave a number of just really great tips on how to find creative ways to take care of yourself. Join a support group, go volunteer. But most of all, I'd say just be gentle with yourself and be intentional about your physical self-care, because that does go a long way in terms of enhancing mental health care.
Stacy,
Yes, Margie.
I see the question where Tunisia is asking an older relative, if you have an older relative experiencing depression but won't get the help they need to address it, how to kind of get them to see a therapist or join a support group. That is a tough one, because as Russell said, we do not grow up with the orientation of going to others for help. I would suggest maybe trying first getting them out of the house, and even to get them more to observe things. Like I went with someone one time, he took his dog to a dog park. So I didn't have a dog. I'm just standing there watching, but watching all those interactions, it just kind of lifted my spirits. And you're laughing, oh, look at this one, oh, that one. So some kind of activity where they are not being, where they're not feeling like they're put on the spot, like they have to interact. So something like that, where you can observe something. Or I also recently went to, well, in fact, Stacy was with me. We went to a restaurant next door to a park, and part of the park had water guide.
I think you got frozen, Margie.
Happening where you could just say, oh, let's just go sit over here for a while, and just kind of ease them into it that way before you're saying anything, the word therapist or support group. It's more easing them into just getting out, kind of being among others.
Those are great suggestions, Margie. And sometimes it definitely helps to get them out. In addition to that, sometimes you can bring things to them in the home. For example, if you know that they like to maybe watch a favorite show on TV, or listen to certain songs, maybe from back in their earlier days, that just lifts their spirit, you can, if you don't have those at home, seek them out and maybe just put them on in the home and have them listen to that. Or if you know that they have certain friends who are maybe nearby, but they aren't mobile to go see them again, as far as the COVID restrictions allow, invite them over, maybe have a tea party or something, maybe playing bingo together or some other kind of game that they might enjoy doing in the home, but just things that helps them feel better. Or if they're mobile, just going for walks with them in the neighborhood, getting them moving. To at least have that endorphin circulating in the body. So finding creative ways to help boost their mood can help improve depression. Find out what they like to eat and make their favorite meals. If they have yes, Margie.
Let me interrupt you a second. Also, if they have some skill that you remember from them, where you could ask, could you teach me how to make that cornbread? Could you show me how something that's going to make them feel still worthwhile and still I count for something, I have something to contribute.
Yes, I like that. I like
And
that.
then hopefully it will slowly get to the point where they would not resist, especially starting with the support group where it's not a spotlight right on them. Just to, let's go sit and listen in on this and ease further on down the road that way.
Mhm. Yeah, so those are just some creative ways that you can reach the elderly. We're hoping that those will be helpful. Another question, can you be prone to suicide because it runs in your family, just like you can be prone to diabetes? Um, well, it's important to keep in mind that suicide, yes, is a mental health concern, it's a condition, and it predominantly is associated with more chronic forms of mental health concerns, such as depression or other forms of chronic illness. And so depression, yes, there's a genetic component to depression. And so you might be predisposed to those chemical imbalances. And if you have family members or loved ones who have passed away as a result of suicide, you are more vulnerable for wanting to complete suicide yourself. So if you find that you have those predisposing vulnerabilities, definitely I would implore you to seek out professional help, because suicidal ideation is not something that you stay at home and try to put a band-aid on. It just doesn't work. So I definitely recommend that if you have a history of depression or other mental health concerns in your family, and you have family members who have completed suicide, I would strongly recommend that you seek out therapy. Anything to add to that, Margie?
No, actually, to be perfectly honest, my mind, I saw this question, do you find a lot of people getting depressed after retiring? And my mind kind of went to that one.
Okay.
So I have to share, I stopped working in the end of 2019, and I had not planned to retire, but I was just going to take a break. And then COVID hit. And so then it was like, well, why bother? I'm not leaving the house. So I have essentially retired without really planning to, but I am retired and now plan to remain retired. Depression after retirement, that can be very real. One reason is many people don't plan for what they can do after retirement. And when you've been spending 9 hours in an office or wherever your place of work is, transportation to and from, and all of a sudden you have all this free time. Many people have not, started hobbies or thought of interest or places they can volunteer, something to fill up that time. So all of a sudden they have this free time and you can feel like I have nothing to do. Also, even the routine of getting up and getting dressed. You now have all these clothes. I have all these clothes in my closet that I don't need anymore. And you don't just rush in and empty your closet. So you're walking in your closet and you're like, oh my word, all this, the shoes, everything, reminding you, you are not going out to work anymore. So it is and also the income. The income is gone. So you start on Social Security. That's typically never what you're bringing in. And so you have to also adjust to that. You could be used to just, oh, let me run by TJ Maxx or Macy's or something. And I see this blouse, I get it. I see this pair of shoes, I get it. It doesn't even cross your mind to calculate, how does this fit in the whole budget? Well, all of a sudden now you don't have the disposable income. So that also is a big change. So it is a common, depression after retirement is common unless you are already involved in meaningful activities outside the house, or you have a list of things you would like to explore where you're like Russell in archery or, whatever you want to do, there's something to get your interest.
I just wanted to add into that because on a personal note, I'm nowhere near retirement as far as I can see just now. But at the start of the pandemic, I was furloughed to work, well, not furloughed, I was sent to work from home for about 3 months. And by the end of the first month, I could definitely see a mental change because
Mm,
the building that I'm in, a lot of people are financially able to have more than one house. And so they had like a house in the Hamptons or what have you. So my building was empty. My next door neighbor went to Colombia and just stayed there. And he's not back yet. And so the silence of the building and just not having somebody to talk to. And there were still some staff at my clinic. I'd find myself just calling them just to hear another voice. And then I found myself ruminating on random things. I was remembering this little girl that fell down a well like in 1983. I think her name was Baby Jessica. And then
mhm.
I was remembering that woman in Australia that a dog ate her baby. And my friends were like, normal people don't think these things. And I started getting very concerned.
Mm.
And then praise God, I was able to go back to work and I did not realize how much I missed the place. I missed the arguments. I missed just seeing somebody that you could say hello to. And so it got me thinking if I felt this way after just 3 months of working from home, I need to start planning. When
Mhm.
I do get to retirement, that I need to have something to do. I I'm not somebody that can just be by myself. Or rather, I don't mind being by myself, but I need the surrounding noise of other people.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. Um, Another part of the question that Avril, how much more time do we have left? Because I'm wanting to be mindful as I'm going through the question.
I'm thinking that once we finish the questions that were already typed, we should probably wrap up after that.
Okay, sounds good. So another person added to the question Margie just responded to and said, not just depression or boredom where retirement was concerned, but also a rapid deterioration in general health. I mean, I'm not retired yet, but I've always commented to Margie and Russell that they have a big yard space. And that I always say to them, guys, do you not see that this yard keeps you young? Because they're always out there picking weeds, weeding up weeds, doing all kinds of stuff, treating the lawn and retreating the lawn. And, so I'd say keep doing stuff. Although you have retired from your regular line of work, find ways to stay active
Mhm.
so that you don't begin to atrophy. Anything else to add to that, Margie, or shall I move on?
Well, just the point that do not wait until you retire to start doing this, because just the fact that you have empty hours in your day, you will not necessarily have the motivation to get on the bike or go to the gym or go walk 4 miles or whatever. So it's really being mindful about your life and just having yourself engaged in activities outside of your personal circle. But yes, it's easy to let time slip by and you let your own self-care slip.
Okay. Someone said, I noticed that you said completed suicide, not committed suicide. Is there a difference? It's a debate that's in the profession and outside of it. And personal, it was just a choice this evening to use completed. I tend to use it more often than committed, but some people do not also like the term completed. I use completed versus committed because some people feel like the term committed sounds a lot more judgmental. Some people feel like completed suggests that, well, they've had thoughts before, ideations, which is often the case, but never acted on it. But in this instance, they followed through on the thoughts that they might have had before. And completed versus committed tends to take the judgmental tone out of it. The term committed tends to be attached a lot of times to you committing a sin, or you're doing something wrong. But suicide needs to be understood in the context of it being a mental health issue. And when you look at it through the lens of it being a mental health issue, it helps even people who, and I know this is a controversial issue among Christians, there are some Christians who believe that if you have a loved one who completed or followed through with suicide, whatever the verbiage you're most comfortable using, then they won't make it to heaven. I'm not going to get into that. But what I will say is suicide is a mental health issue. And if you perform an act because your mind isn't right, I want to believe that God takes it into consideration. But I'm not a pastor, I'm not a religious person in terms of this is not a religious debate, so I'm going to move along from that. Yes, I'm Christian. I'm very religious. But
there
I'm
was-
not a
Stacy,
There was a question asking about a teenager feeling depressed.
yes, I was going to also say that's a very important question. If you can address that, Stacy. If they go to a therapist, will the therapist tell the parents what is said during the session?
Okay, the parents, well, a therapist who sees a teenager should have the conversation with both teenager and parents to let them know that for the sake of the child, the meetings need to be confidential and remains that way. Of course, because the child is underage, not yet an adult, the parents will always have access to the child's record, but only if there really is a detriment that's on the table. If the child is at risk or in danger to themselves or others, then parents will need to be involved. But the therapist shouldn't just make it so that whatever the teenager says to the therapist just goes right back to the parents. That shouldn't be the case at all. And so parents should have that understanding, and the therapist should help the parent and the child know that whatever you say in the space is confidential, and help the parent understand the reason why it needs to be that way. So the child will feel safe just talking about whatever is bothering them, and they can trust that relationship and know that the therapist isn't going to go back and report to parents. The exceptions, of course, if the child, and that goes across the board, whether you're a child or an adult, if you talk about suicide, or you're going to kill yourself or someone else, then your privacy goes out the door when there's peril involved. But so I'm hoping that, whichever therapist that a teenager is working with understands the importance of creating that trusting space with a teenager and help the parents understand. I'm hoping that understands it. Tommy answers the question. What other question? Is there any other question? I think we've covered it all.
Yeah, I'm skimming through. I feel like that was the last one. There were some general statements. Reggie was confirming when you were speaking about having I guess power of attorney and stuff with an elderly family member. He said, yeah, my grandma allowed me to handle her business and personal affairs, but she was very alert for the most part until she died 10 years ago. It's not easy for older parents to depend on their children and grandchildren for help.
Very difficult.
Doctor, we have a question, Sister Byam.
Sure, Sister Byam, go ahead.
Sister Nicely just said that if I understood well, a young person who is contemplating committing suicide, it is kept confidential from the parent.
No, that's not what she said, Sister Byam.
Okay, that's what I was saying. Let me hear it clearly. Let me understand. Because I was wondering at that versus to the person who's going to kill somebody and tell the therapist, look, I have suicidal thoughts, I have homicidal thoughts. I just feel like I want to kill someone.
Yeah. So 3 things that will always make your doctor or therapist have to break confidentiality. If you express that you're feeling depressed enough to hurt yourself, if you express that somebody is hurting you as an underage person, and if you express that you're going to hurt somebody. So hurt yourself, hurt somebody hurting you. They will always have to break confidentiality for that. I think what she was speaking to was the teenager or young person who is going to therapy. does the therapist go and tell their parent what they're saying in therapy? Because I think the question was trying to figure out, do they feel as though their therapy session is a safe space?
Right, and again, and thanks, Avril, for clarifying that for me. Sister Byam, did Avril answer the question for you?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Once there is, so again, I cannot speak for all therapists, but I'm saying as a general understanding of what the therapeutic relationship should look like, the therapist has a responsibility to orient both parent and child to how therapy works and the boundaries and the issues pertaining to confidentiality and limits to confidentiality, right? So in establishing that therapeutic relationship, the therapist needs to have a conversation with parent to say, hey, we're wanting your child to feel safe in this therapeutic space. So they need to know that they come alone and they see me. And whatever they're talking about stays between the both of us. So I can't come back and tell you everything that Johnny or Mary is saying to me. However, if they tell me that they have plans to kill themselves, kill someone else, or if somebody's in danger, then that's where confidentiality is breached.
Okay,
Make sense?
I have one more question if you don't mind. I don't want to
Sure.
prolong. I don't want to prolong the session.
Go ahead.
I am retired. It's going to be a year coming this September, December. I was a school teacher, and I really look forward to retirement. But I know there were two teachers at my school who retirement was thrust upon them, and that to me was a mental thing. How do you cope in a situation like that when retirement is thrust upon you? It's like their boss is saying, "Okay, you don't want to retire. I'm going to retire you," you know. And these people, it was very difficult for one lady. She kept coming back to the school wanting to work, you know, and it was very hard for her to cope. What do you do, or how do you counsel somebody like that?
That is quite a challenge, as you say, when it's unplanned. You know, one thing that of course, your feelings of self-worth, it's like, well, what, I have all this experience, they don't want me. But I would encourage the teacher to volunteer at another school, to volunteer at a Boys and Girls Club, you know, someplace where she can still be involved with young people, still use her areas of knowledge, of expertise, of guidance, of mentoring, to be able to still help kids on their journey, of their educational journey and their personal journey as they grow up. So hopefully she would be able to work with kids in that way. Also, during the pandemic, last year, I had the occasion to do some work with Pathfinders, which I had not done for, I won't even say how many years, but to learn of the different areas of honors that they are working on, coming from, you know, animal tracking to cooking to constellations to Bible marking. There are so many areas where a teacher would be invaluable for helping kids learn to pass, you know, to achieve Pathfinder honors. So to me, to look around in ways where she could still have contact with young people would be one way where she could continue to feel useful and a part of society as she is used to.
And to add to what Margie said, it also helps to challenge your thought patterns. For that kind of situation where there's sudden retirement that's thrust upon you, it's easy for you to automatically allow yourself to feel useless, like, man, they just got rid of me in a blink without even giving me any notice. You mean I wasn't valuable all these years? They got rid of me so easily. And so it's important to check our thought process, because if we keep in mind that our thoughts contribute to how we're feeling, which in turn impacts how we behave. And so it's important to keep tabs on how we're thinking, because our thoughts, we become what we think.
What did you say earlier, Stacy, about there's a certain term for looking at other people's lives and their successes and what they're doing.
Oh, highlight reel.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, one last question came to me and I typed it in the chat a while ago.
Who do therapists see when they are feeling depressed or anxious? It must be hard hearing everyone's sadness and problems. If a therapist is depressed, will they still see patients? Good question. As therapists, we know that we have the responsibility to be intentional about taking care of ourselves because we are the tool. We're not working with a hammer or a chisel or some other tool. We are the tool. So yes, therapists see their own therapists and process, work through issues, or you are intentional about consultation, collaboration on the job, and not keeping it all in. But depending on where you work, at least where I work, we have weekly staff meetings where you staff cases or you just check in with each other. How are you doing? How are you managing the workload? What needs to be adjusted? We know to be intentional about self-care. And yes, if you get depressed, you go see a therapist. And we also know that we have an obligation to not attempt to hold space for clients when you are impaired. So if you find that you are at the place where you are impaired, then we have an ethical responsibility to step aside, take care of ourselves until we are in a better place to hold space for clients.
And I'm
not a therapist or a psychologist, but at my institution, for the provider staff, they have a system called H3, Helping Healers Heal. Because especially with COVID, a lot of doctors, nurses, physical therapists, respiratory therapists, anybody that has any type of patient care, even the persons who clean the floor, are all suffering from some level of PTSD. So they started the system together so that we can also get our own mental care, somebody we can talk to after just a stressful day of seeing patients die or still getting worse or sick or something.
And the same goes for us social workers. We are involved with the program I worked with, helping vulnerable adults age 55 and above. I assisted them with every aspect of their life. So whether it was, needing forms filled out or they're, they can't pay their heating bill, helping them find a resource, their family relations. I heard all about that. All these aspects of their lives I helped them with. And so after a while, you feel like, I don't want to get any older. This life is not going well for so many people. So as social workers, we too relied on each other to be able to have I had great colleagues that helped. And then we also go to therapists.
Yeah.
We go to counseling also, because you simply cannot, as the person said, have all this pouring over you and it not affect you.
I think that's the last of the questions, Avril. So
yes, that's the last question. No, I see that near the end of your presentation, Stacey, you had a slide with some Bible verses.
Oh, correct. Yes. Thanks for that reminder. Let me just try to find that. Let's bring that back up so we can close up.
Thanks for the presentation. We need it.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you so much for coming out to support everyone. This really helps us to get the message out so we can help all of our brothers and sisters.
So I just selected just a few Bible verses. It's by no means an exhaustive list. Philippians 4, verse 6-7, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication. We know that one, make your request known unto God. The well-known shepherd psalm, Psalm 23, Psalm 34, verse 7 and 18. When the righteous cries, the Lord hears and delivers them. Isaiah 41, verse 10. This has been one of my faves for a long time. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. 1 First Peter 5 verse 7, casting all your cares upon him because he cares for you. Matthew 11 verse 28, come to me all who labor and I will give you rest. Jeremiah 29 verse 11, another one of my faves, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper and not to harm you, to give you an expected end or to give you hope in the future, depending on your translation. Proverbs 3 verse 5 to 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding. Psalm 30 verse 5, for his anger is but for a moment, but his favor for a lifetime. God favors us. Philippians 4 verse 6 to 7, another one of my faves, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, just make your request known. Psalm 9 verse 9, the Lord is a stronghold for the oppressed. If you're feeling downcast, God is there for you. Isaiah 40 verse 31, they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. Many times we develop mental health concerns because we worry a lot. We worry about things that we have no control over and we ruminate. And, you know, God says, just wait upon me, trust me, and I will give you the strength. And finally, Deuteronomy 31 verse 8 says, it is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you and will not forsake you. So I have multiple Bible verses that I use to give me strength throughout my days. As the question rightly suggested, it's not easy to listen to all of the concerns that come your way every day as a therapist. But for one, it helps that I like what I do. I really like what I do. And then two, I don't leave home in the days without committing my day to God, without saying, okay, God, it's you and me again, one more day. You know, and when I come back home at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, God, we did it. Thank you for all that you took me through today, and thank you for the wisdom that you gave me. Before I see my clients, I will ask God to, you know, show me what it is that this client needs today and how to be the person that they're needing today. And I'm sure Margie has her spiritual care routine that she, you know, she follows through. So I'm hoping that these Bible verses and the overall presentation was helpful for you guys. Margie, any closing out comments for you?
Well, just a quick way that I approach my job is just remembering that every person I encounter is God's child. He loves them dearly. He loves them more than I ever could, and that I am there to help them. And I am appreciate being asked to participate. I have enjoyed it. And Russell, he's talking with someone who is suicidal. So I pray as he's on the phone with calls, you know, I pray that the Lord gives him the right words, but he also was pleased to be a part of it.
Thank you so much, Stacy and Margie and Russell, even though he's not with us exactly right now. This has been a very, very well thought out, well presented, and greatly appreciated presentation. I will say that I've just seen so many more of my kids in the clinic, you know, just being depressed, especially with COVID and the isolation and everything has changed and not knowing what the future holds for them anymore. And I think a lot of people may have even been on the borderline and then COVID just kind of tipped us over. So thank you so much for your time. I know that this took time to put together. It wasn't just that you were here now, but you took time out of your day away from your other responsibilities to put this together. And we thank you for that. And we will consider you to be honorary members of the Ephesus family. Thank you so much. And so I'm just going to share screen one last time. And everyone, thank you so much for being with us as we had the program today. And I encourage you all to log in again tomorrow night at 7 p.m. I will be the presenter along with our very own Jennifer Anthony, who is a licensed behavioral analyst. We will be speaking about children with developmental disorders, specifically children with autism, and how we can lead them to Christ and how we can help their families. A lot of times as a church, we really don't know how can we be of help to our brothers and sisters that have family members with developmental disabilities, or how can we also be kinder to our fellow members who have developmental disabilities. So our program continues for this week. Tomorrow will be Jennifer Anthony and myself. On Tuesday, we have Sister Faluke, who will be getting us to work out in the Word. On Wednesday, we have Dr. Brian Davis Josephs. And on Sabbath, we have Dr. Nicole Haid and Dr. Dean Preddy. Once again, thank you. Pastor Marshall, could I ask you just to close us out with prayer, please?
Sure, that is not a problem. Let us bow our heads for prayer. We want to thank our presenters. I know it was said already, but on behalf of Pastor Brown and myself, we thank you. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Merciful Father and our God, we are so grateful to be in your presence this afternoon. We thank you for the information that we have received, and we pray that you would help us to implement it and to be useful tools in your quiver, oh God, as you shoot us into the world at people so that they may give their lives to you. Bless us and keep us, we pray. And as we prepare for tomorrow evening, we ask that you bring us back safely. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.